Ready to elevate your credit understanding and score? With insider tips and a plan, you can take action to improving your score, which can save thousands in unnecessary finance charges. Let's tackle today's topic with your coach, Credit Christy.
Hey friends, it's Christy, your credit coach. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. Today, let's talk about student loans because they are now coming due for approximately 28 million Americans. So there has been a 3-year pause on repayments. Even if you wanted to make repayments, there's a good chance your loan servicer wouldn't even accept it. But this influx of 28 million Americans now needing to make repayments starting this month, October, that's 5 times more than the number of people who usually enter repayment after finishing college and having their 6-month deferment term before that new loan starts. So in addition to having to take on this new big hefty payment, while things are so crazy expensive to live as it is, there's a lot of problems out there that are frustrating a lot of borrowers. So wanted to just give you a heads up so you know what you're dealing with, but also you can go into this with some information that can help arm you as you take on this new task. So you may have had Navient as a student loan servicer in the past. Well, they quit servicing federal student loans during the pandemic, and about 40% of borrowers now have a different loan servicer than when they had made their last payment. So if you go to try to pay Navient, they may not be servicing your student loan. Nelnet is a name that has taken over a lot of these loans, but they have also reduced their staff by about 500 jobs this year. Can anyone say long wait holds and terrible customer service? Get ready. And then there are those who signed up for Biden's new SAVE plan, and it was designed to cut monthly payments in half. But the reality is a lot of people are seeing more like double what their last payment was because a lot of people pre-pandemic were enjoying income-driven benefits, income-based repayments. But unfortunately, under this plan, that won't go into effect until next July. So the organization that oversees these loans is called the Federal Student Aid Office. Well, they received $800 million less than what the Biden administration requested in this year's funding bill. Go figure, we have a broke government, so they've got to cut where they can. Well, that just means that they're going to be severely understaffed. And so if you have a problem with your loan servicer, you may not be able to bring it up the flagpole to the Federal Student Aid Office and get help readily available. So what does this mean for the average person? This means that hundreds and hundreds of dollars every single month are going to go back to repaying these really old loans that have been just kind of sitting out there. And prior to the pandemic, they were accruing interest. I have seen student loans being reported on credit reports that started off as $20,000 and are now up to like $34,000 because they weren't making any repayments. They just kept kicking that can down the road and deferring that repayment schedule, all the while interest was accruing. So I am grateful that for the last 3 years, interest has not been accruing, meaning it's not making that balance larger and larger every single month without payments going to it. But student loan payments could pull about $100 billion out of Americans' spending into the economy. And that's just projected for 1 year worth of repayments. So where is this money coming from? We all know the cost of living and inflation and pretty much everything has gone up to ridiculous numbers. Not to mention if you carry any credit card balances, you have noticed those minimum payments increasing what feels like every month because the interest rate has been increased by 8.5% over the last year and a half. And so the majority of your payment, your minimum payment, is going towards just paying interest. But I have seen what used to be $75 minimum payments now be $250 minimum payments. And if you owe $30, $50, $100,000 in student loans, where is this money going to come from? I truly believe most people don't have discretionary savings. In other words, money left over after paying all of their bills that they could put towards their savings goals, paying off debt, or throwing money towards their retirement accounts. So let's just call it what it is. There's going to be a big problem when it comes to the ability to spend in our economy. These retailers, where you go just to Target and Walmart, spending on Amazon, all of those things are going to really wind up tightening up because of this squeeze with these payments being required. So how do these student loans affect your credit score? Well, for the last 3 years with no payments, those student loans have really just been in a neutral status. So it didn't hurt you and it didn't help you. If there's nothing to report as far as payments, but there's nothing due, it just kind of was, there. So now with a payment being required, as long as it's paid on time, it should have a positive impact on your credit profile because it's one more trade line that's reporting on your behalf to reflect your ability to borrow money and pay it back on time. So student loans are installment loans, and it should be a fixed monthly payment. Now, here's where I think people are really going to trip up, and it's going to hurt, if not demolish, credit profiles, is if somebody ignored the fact that payments are coming back into play this month, or they forgot about it, or they go to pay the prior loan servicer, discover they don't own that loan or service that loan any longer, and they get frustrated trying to find who they're supposed to pay, and so they just don't make a payment. Payment history makes up 35% of your overall credit score algorithm. It's actually the largest of all of the factors that make up your credit score. And so it's that important. Well, what if you just don't have the ability to make the payments? Don't ignore this debt. Don't just put that bill aside and say, I'm going to figure this out some other time. Call the loan servicer. They might be able to do something for you. They might be able to set you up on an income-based repayment, which could be a lower payment than what is required right now. And even if they're not able to offer that to you right away, get that request in the works. They could get it going as quickly as a month or two from now, and that could stop the bleeding for a little while. But whatever you do, please do avoid late payments, especially if it's a larger loan amount. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. And so that larger loan amount, if it shows up late, could have a very detrimental impact on your credit history and your credit profile. And another question I want to address that you might be wondering about, how does this affect mortgage loan applications? Well, if it doesn't affect your credit score, then there won't be any impact. But quite frankly, we weren't able to just ignore that student loan anyway. Even though there was not a required payment, depending on the loan type, we had to either take 0.5% or 1% of the outstanding balance, depending on what kind of loan type you were applying for, and use that as a pretend payment for qualification purposes. Basically, the loan guidelines knew that repayment would have to start at some point in time, and those guidelines were set to make sure that you could afford to pay for the home loan and other debts that show up on your credit report, even those that didn't have a required payment at that moment in time. So a simple example, if you had a $10,000 student loan and it was in forbearance, we would have to use 0.5% on an FHA loan, so a $50 payment held against you for qualification purposes. And for conventional loans, one program allows for 0.5%, the other one is 1%. So if it were 1% on that $10,000 loan, or for every $10,000 outstanding, it would have been a $100 payment that was factored in to your debt ratio for the purposes of qualifying for a home loan. So even though many people didn't have to pay those payments, if you were applying for a mortgage loan, we still calculated in a roundabout number for qualification purposes. And now, moving forward, we'll use the payment that's reflected on the credit report. Whether it's income-based repayment or a full repayment, will go off of what's being reported on the credit report. So I guess the intention of this episode is just to throw out a little bit of a warning. I think this will definitely have an impact on our economy, just like the stalling of real estate sales because interest rates are so high and prices are so high. It's really stalling out the real estate market. And then the combination of all of these things I've mentioned between student loans and higher APRs on credit cards, we are in for what looks like a pretty tough way to end 2023. So I'd love to hear from you. If you have student loans and now they're going back into a repayment, what is your monthly payment? And where is this money going to come from? Do you have money in savings that you're going to dive into? Are you going to have to give up something in order to make this payment? Are you going to struggle being able to find a way to make this payment? Now, I paid my student loans off years ago, but man, I remember that chunk of change going out every single month for what felt like a decade. And every time I looked at my balance, it just didn't have the kind of decrease, that impact I was looking for. It was so frustrating because I wasn't seeing that balance go down to match the amount of money it felt like it was squeezing out of me every month. So I know how deep and raw that cut can feel. I've been there. But I also wasn't getting squeezed from every other angle like our current economy is doing for so many. So you may be gainfully employed and you may be keeping up on all of your bills at the moment, but are you going to be able to sustain? And if not, what is plan B? And if that's something that we need to work out together, reach out to me at questions@creditchristie.com. I will take your questions and turn it into an upcoming episode full of ideas and suggestions, but I want it to be for what you're facing, not for what I project you might be dealing with. If we haven't connected, why not? Find me on all social media at Credit Christie. And until next time, my friends, stay well.